Number two will take a little bit more. The universe has always existed. Now, in order to do that one, we have to know something about the second law of thermodynamics. There's one of those great big words. Is that a scary word? No, we're going to make it simple. Thermo means what? Heat. Heat dynamics. Talking about heat dynamics here. Second law of thermodynamics deals with heat energy. Now, there's a lot of incorrect definitions out there in textbooks on the second law. A lot of definitions will say we're going from order to disorder. That is an incorrect definition. Why? Because there are some processes that go from disorder to order naturally. So that's an incorrect definition. Some people say we're going from complexity to less complexity. Well, how do you measure that? Can't really measure that. So that's not a correct definition. The definition deals with heat energy. Energy goes from a state of usable energy to a state of less usable energy for doing work in an isolated system. That is the correct definition. Those are things we can measure. So be careful about definitions that have changed in textbooks. So the second law of thermodynamics, let's take a look at this. I'm going to use an example here to explain this. And the example is called no refills. No refills. Let's suppose somebody just gave you a brand new car. And you get to choose any car you want. And everything for the lifetime of this car is paid for. You never have to pay a penny for anything. How many would choose an old station wagon? No, don't even make them anymore. How many would choose a nice sports car? Yeah, we'd like that. Be honest, yes. You'd like one. That way you don't have to take the children with you anymore, do you? Yes, okay, I got it. Yes. Okay. Everything's paid for. Any car you want. There's only one catch to the whole thing. Just one small catch. All you ever get is one tank of gas. No refills. That really ruined it now, didn't it? So what happens after you've driven this car about 300 miles? You've used up all the gasoline. You've used up all the available energy to drive this car, haven't you? It's no longer usable to drive this car. That's the end of the energy. So what are you going to do with the car now? You can look at it. You can polish it. Take it apart and use it for other things. Or maybe sell it to somebody for a museum piece. But will no longer go on its own. That's what we mean by the second law. Energy, when it gets used up, is no longer usable for doing the same work. Now let's go to outer space. Stars. Stars also have a finite amount of energy. Now what is it that stars do? Now I'm going to put this term up there for one reason. I can pronounce it, it makes me look smart sometimes. They do a process called thermonuclear fusion. How many talked about that last night at the dinner table? Nobody. Okay. Thermonuclear fusion. What is that? It's when we burn lighter elements into heavier elements. In other words, hydrogen burns into, what's that next one? Helium. Helium burns into carbon. Carbon into oxygen. Oxygen into iron. And when all the available energy is burned up, most of those stars will just begin to gravitationally collapse inward and then explode into a great big supernova. That's what happens for a star. When they've used up their energy, that's it, they're gone. No more energy. That is the principle of the second law of thermodynamics again. Now, our universe is a finite universe. As far as we know, there's nothing physical outside this universe adding any energy in. It's a finite universe. Finite amount of energy. Therefore, if the universe had no beginning, then it would be an infinite number of years old. And I remind you here, infinite number of years is longer than 1 trillion years. Okay, keep that in point now. And remember, energy is always decreasing, isn't it? It's always decreasing. What does infinity mean? Time without end. It's Latin for unboundless or unlimited extent of time. Okay, now let's apply this word infinity in energy and stars. Many of our big supergiant stars, they burn up their energy rather rapidly. After about 100 million years, most all our supergiant stars would have burned up their energy, and they'd be gone because there's nothing to replenish that energy. After about 10 billion years, stars like our sun would have burned up all their energy. After about 100 billion years, every star in this universe would have pretty much burned up its energy. And certainly, after 1 trillion years, every star in this universe would have burned up its energy. We know of no stars that have that much fuel to burn for that long. Therefore, if this universe had no beginning, every star in this universe should have burned up its energy and been gone. There should be no stars in this universe. Has anybody seen any stars lately? Yes. The fact that we can see stars is powerful evidence this universe had to have a beginning. It could not be infinite. Oh, but wait a minute, Mike. You forgot something. Stars are forming all the time. How does that happen? Well, it's easy. Open up any one of our textbooks. We get these great big gas and dust clouds called nebula out there, and they rotate around and around and around out there. As they rotate around and around, they begin to gravitationally collapse inward and eventually form a new star. And there's a technical term for that process. It is called baloney. Anybody that has taken Physics 101, turned to the chapter on heat pressure, knows full well stars will not form by naturalistic processes. Because here's what happens. As those nebulae rotate around and around, they will begin to gravitationally collapse inward. But as they collapse inward, they generate something called heat pressure. And this is something we can measure. The heat pressure is always stronger than the gravity and will always cause that cloud to expand outward, never inward. No one has ever seen a star form, and the principles of physics prohibit stars from forming. The only known way to get these stars out there is turn to day 4, and he made the stars also. But yet our textbooks keep teaching and showing that stars are forming naturalistic all the time. No one's ever seen one form. Therefore, the universe cannot be infinite. It had to have a beginning, a highly energized beginning, or there would be no stars in this universe. Again, the fact that we see stars is evidence the universe had a beginning. So now what we've done is we've broken down the strongholds, number 1 and number 2. Let's go to number 3. The universe was created. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. Now, I haven't told them where God came from yet, have I? That's the last part. Remember, start with Scripture, bring down their strongholds, and then we're going to end with the Scripture. So here we go. Where did God come from? Well, there's 2 possibilities. Number 1, there's a regression of gods all the way back to an all-powerful created God. In other words, who made God? That's easy. A super God made God. Well, who made the super God? That's easy. A super God made a super God who made God. And we go back and back and back till we get to the original God. You know, there is a religion out there that teaches that. Yes. Or there's one God and only one God who created everything. Well, how do we choose between these 2 then? Well, this is where we invoke something called the principle of Occam's razor. Now, the principle of Occam's razor says this: if you have more than one possibility, choose the simplest or the one with the least assumptions. And that happens to be this: remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else. I am God and there is none like me. That's where we end right there. We start with Scripture, bring down the strongholds, and we end with Scripture. And where would I go from there? Would you like to know him? His name is Jesus Christ. Where do I end up? The gospel. Therefore, if scientists are unable to explain the origin of matter through naturalistic means, they're without a foundation. Why should I accept evolution when you cannot produce the evidence? I already have a faith. Tell me about your faith, and I'll tell you about my faith. And oh, by the way, tell me what your faith has to offer me, and I'll tell you what my faith in Jesus Christ has to offer you. Therefore, it is logical and reasonable to believe that God, not unknown events, created this universe. See, we have a very logical and reasonable faith. We know who created, what was created, how it was created, when it was created, and how long it took to create. We do have answers. So power question number 1, where did the universe come from? The only logical and scientific answer is God.